Jacob "Buck" Lowe, the fan favorite from Mountain Monsters, has just broken his silence, revealing disturbing truths about what really happened behind the cameras. What he's claiming isn't just shocking, it's terrifying. Hidden footage, secret investigations, and a government warning that nearly shut down production for good. Was Mountain Monsters really a show about chasing folklore? Or were they documenting something no one was ever supposed to find? Before we uncover the truth, hit subscribe, because what you're about to hear has been buried for years, and tonight it finally comes to light. Before the cameras, before the fame, Jacob "Buck" Lowe was just another kid from West Virginia who grew up surrounded by stories of things that shouldn't exist. Born and raised in the Appalachian foothills, Lowe was fascinated by local folklore. Not the campfire kind, but the whispered ones. Tales of shadow figures in the hollers, red eyes blinking from tree lines, and miners who vanished deep underground. When Mountain Monsters premiered in 2013, audiences met Buck as the comic relief, the rookie who was eager but naive, always ready to run headfirst into the dark with a flashlight and faith in his team. But as the seasons went on, something changed. The laughter faded, the jokes slowed, and Buck became more guarded, more serious. Off-camera, castmates said Buck had developed an obsession with cross-referencing the show's locations with historical records and old missing person reports. He'd spend hours in county libraries, talking to locals who refused to go near certain ridgelines. He wasn't looking for monsters, one former producer claimed. He was looking for patterns. Fans who met him at conventions described him as polite but distracted, like his mind was elsewhere, still out in those woods. The transformation wasn't lost on his fellow cast members either. Wild Bill once joked during a live stream, "Buck ain't sleeping good. Man's dreaming about the woods, talking back." What few knew was that Buck had started keeping a private journal filled with sketches and cryptic notes that didn't make sense to anyone else. When pressed about it, he'd smile and say, "Just in case we find something they don't want us to." That line would prove prophetic, because behind the curtain of the show's entertainment veneer, Buck was uncovering details about the Appalachian region that didn't fit neatly into folklore, details that made even the producers nervous. And it all began with a single investigation the network would later erase from its archives. The story that changed everything began during the filming of the 2015 episode known internally as The Creature of Boone County. It was supposed to be another thrilling hunt. Thermal cameras, motion sensors, and wild theories about a cryptid seen near an old railway tunnel. But what the crew captured that night, according to Buck, was something that made even the most skeptical members of the Mountain Monsters team fall silent. They were tracking heat signatures moving just beyond the tree line when Buck spotted a humanoid figure standing upright at the edge of the clearing. It wasn't running, it wasn't hiding, it was just watching them. The crew's thermal scopes caught it clearly, nearly 7 feet tall, moving with a precision that didn't match any known animal. Then, just as quickly, every camera on site began to fail. Batteries drained, audio spiked into static. By the time they checked their footage later that night, everything from that moment forward had been corrupted. Producers told the team it was a technical glitch, but Buck didn't believe it. A few days later, an editor working post-production allegedly told him something that shook him, that a second copy of the raw files existed, one the network had quietly locked in an encrypted server marked "Do Not Distribute." Within weeks, the entire episode's storyline was rewritten. The strange sighting was replaced with a harmless, false alarm narrative. Fans noticed inconsistencies, mismatched weather, missing dialogue, an abrupt ending that felt edited to hide something. Months later, during a small podcast interview, Buck broke his silence and admitted, "What we filmed that night wasn't a monster story. It was something else, something walking like us, but it wasn't us." That confession vanished from the internet within 24 hours. But by then, a handful of listeners had already clipped the audio. What Buck said next would ignite one of the most chilling rumors in Appalachian folklore history, that the Mountain Monsters crew had captured real evidence the government didn't want aired. Just months after the mysterious Boone County footage vanished, Buck's life took a darker turn. It began one night in late 2017 when he received a phone call from an unlisted number. The voice on the other end was calm, deliberate, and unlike anyone he knew. "Mr. Lowe," it said, "you and your team need to stop filming in the Tigard Valley region. There are areas marked restricted for a reason Buck assumed it was a prank. But when the caller mentioned the exact coordinates of their next shoot, a location not yet released to the network, his stomach dropped. The voice paused, then added, "You've already seen something you shouldn't have. Don't make us come down there again." And then the line went dead. Buck immediately tried to trace the call, but his phone log showed no record of it. The number didn't exist. When he called his carrier, the technician claimed there was a temporary system error on his account. Days later, those records were gone entirely. Buck told his producer, who brushed it off as a fan or hoax, but the timing was too precise. He turned to the one man who would take him seriously, John "Trapper" Tice, the team's legendary leader. When Buck explained what happened, Trapper went quiet. Then, after a long pause, he said, "Son, we've been watched for years. Every time we get close, the ground starts shaking. They don't want folks knowing what's under it." That week, Buck started noticing small, unsettling details. A dark SUV parked down the road from his house, a drone hovering above the team's base camp, strange clicks on his phone line during interviews. Crew members laughed it off, but Buck was convinced someone was following them. On the next shoot, he confronted the issue directly during a filmed segment, saying on camera, "If they're listening, maybe they'll finally tell us why." But that entire scene never aired. Editors later said it didn't fit the tone. From that moment on, Buck realized Mountain Monsters wasn't just documenting folklore. It was stepping on the toes of something far bigger, something that didn't want to be found. In 2018, Buck's quiet suspicion turned into full-blown paranoia, or at least that's what his colleagues thought. He had become fixated on uncovering what really happened to the missing Boone County footage. After months of asking questions, he finally got a tip from a former production assistant who had worked in the editing room during that season. She told him that before the files were deleted, someone from outside the Destination America network had accessed the servers remotely. They weren't producers, she whispered. They were federal. According to her, an entire batch of raw footage was copied and flagged under a government code label, Non-Terrestrial Wildlife, Class 7. That phrase didn't match any U.S. fish and wildlife category, but it appeared in internal file logs. When Buck heard that, he started digging deeper, calling contacts in IT, chasing rumors, even contacting online whistleblower groups. What he uncovered next made even the skeptics pause. He found a screenshot from a data leak showing Mountain Monsters listed among other media suppression cases involving paranormal investigations and off-record government monitoring. The metadata tied back to a private defense contractor known for handling unusual biological recoveries. Buck couldn't believe what he was seeing. Their show, the same one known for laughter and Appalachian folklore, was apparently being treated like a national security risk. That night, Buck called Wild Bill and Jeff and showed them the screenshot. Bill's jaw dropped. "You're saying we're on some kind of government list for catching Bigfoot?" Buck shook his head. "No," he said, "not Bigfoot, something worse." Within days, the screenshot disappeared from the forums, scrubbed clean. The whistleblower who'd shared it deleted all her accounts. And then, strangely, a man claiming to represent Homeland Resource Oversight contacted the network, and every mention of the Boone County footage was permanently removed from their digital archives. That's when Buck realized the truth wasn't just being buried, it was being erased. By early 2019, the tension surrounding Mountain Monsters had reached its peak. Fans noticed long gaps between episodes, cryptic network statements, and rumors of production halts due to safety issues. Behind the scenes, Buck said the team wasn't just scared, they were being silenced. But the one person who refused to stay quiet was Trapper Tice. Though his health was failing, the old hunter remained sharp as ever. "They think they can bury this," he told Buck one night during a late call, "but the Earth don't keep secrets forever." According to Buck, Trapper had been doing his own research, compiling decades' worth of encounter reports that were never shown on television. Some of those came from military bases and old miners who claimed they'd seen tall figures with reflective eyes walking along restricted ridgelines after dark. Trapper's theory? That the creatures they'd been hunting weren't cryptids at all. They were sentries, biological watchers tied to something older and and more organized than anyone imagined. A few weeks before his death, Trapper gave Buck a USB drive sealed in duct tape. "If something happens to me," he said, "make sure this doesn't end up in their hands." But after Trapper passed away, the drive vanished from Buck's truck. He reported it stolen, but there were no signs of a break-in. The local sheriff told him it was probably a coincidence. Maybe he dropped it. Buck didn't believe that for a second. In a podcast interview years later, Buck described the final message Trapper sent him just days before he died. The text read, "They're moving something out of the tunnels. If we disappear, tell them it's not a legend." The night that message was sent, strange radio interference was recorded across several counties in West Virginia. And in the Mountain Monsters archives, there's still an entire week of footage that was never released, marked confidential, sealed, and filed under Trapper's name. Whatever was on that drive, Buck believes it was the key to everything, the proof that turned their monster hunts into a real-life cover-up. After Trapper's death, something shifted, not just in the Mountain Monsters team, but in how the show was being handled. Buck described it best in a live stream months later. It stopped feeling like entertainment and started feeling like surveillance. He wasn't exaggerating. Production meetings that used to take place in open offices were suddenly invite-only. Crew members had to sign new non-disclosure agreements that forbade them from discussing unreleased materials or field anomalies. And every episode outlined now had to be cleared by a network-appointed compliance officer. None of this had happened before. The breaking point came during a shoot in Summers County. The crew captured something on a thermal drone, a figure far larger than a man, moving through the trees with unnatural speed. The moment Buck requested a copy of the raw file, he was told it had been corrupted. When he insisted on seeing the backup footage, he was informed that all secondary storage had been reformatted by mistake. Within 48 hours, the team received a message from the network's parent company stating that content pertaining to non-verifiable biological entities was no longer permitted to air. This wasn't just censorship, it was an erasure of their work. Buck, furious, went to social media to vent his frustration, posting cryptic messages about forces behind the curtain. Within days, those posts disappeared. His account was briefly suspended for abnormal activity, and he later discovered his phone had been remotely wiped. Meanwhile, fans began noticing the edits. Conversations were cut mid-sentence. Equipment malfunctions that Buck swore were not natural were replaced with staged bloopers, and in one strange case, an entire episode was uploaded with the wrong audio, the team's dialogue replaced by a looping background track. When questioned, the network's PR team said it was a post-production error, but Buck didn't buy it. He believed the truth was being buried again, and this time it wasn't some faceless editor behind the curtain. He started to suspect the involvement of something much deeper, a partnership between private media and government handlers. Because if Mountain Monsters was ever allowed to show what they'd actually seen in those woods, he believed the world's understanding of reality would never be the same. By late 2020, Buck Jacob Lowe was no longer the same man who first appeared on Mountain Monsters as the big-hearted rookie with an infectious laugh. He was paranoid, withdrawn, and convinced that someone, or something, was keeping tabs on him. Crew members later claimed that Buck had started keeping detailed journals filled with coded notes and strange sketches of symbols he said were etched into trees during night shoots. "It's a warning," he told one cameraman. "They mark the places we're not supposed to go." In December of that year, Buck vanished for 4 days. According to his family, he'd told them he was going on a solo scouting trip in an undisclosed area of the Appalachian foothills. When he returned, he was shaken and refused to talk about what happened. But those close to him said he was different. He started locking his doors in broad daylight, stopped taking calls from the network, and deleted his online presence almost entirely. Then, just as fans began speculating about his absence, a strange video surfaced on a conspiracy forum. It appeared to show Buck in a wooded area, his camera shaking as he whispered, "They weren't supposed to be here. It's not just one creature. There's a gate." The clip ended abruptly, cutting to static. Within 12 hours, the video was removed. The forum moderator later stated that external takedown requests had been filed by a government media agency. When Buck resurfaced on Mountain Monsters months later, he looked exhausted but strangely composed. His demeanor had changed, calmer, more cautious, almost rehearsed. He avoided direct questions about the missing footage and made vague comments about respecting the boundaries. Off camera, though, he told a podcast host that some truths aren't meant for television. Behind the scenes, crew members claimed he'd received a non-negotiable ultimatum from outside advisors, warning him to stay quiet if he valued his safety and the show's future. Fans noticed it too. Buck's eyes told a different story. Whatever he saw out there during those missing 4 days, it was enough to silence him, and enough to convince him that Mountain Monsters was no longer hunting legends. It had stumbled onto something the world wasn't ready to face. In early 2021, whispers began circulating among Mountain Monsters fans and insiders alike. Rumors of a lost tape, one that Buck had recorded during his mysterious 4-day disappearance. The footage allegedly surfaced briefly on a dark web server under the cryptic title Black Site Footage 001. According to those who claim to have seen it before it was taken down, the video showed Buck walking through a fog-covered ravine at night, holding a flashlight and muttering into a handheld recorder. "It's watching from the ridge," he said breathlessly. "Not one of ours. Not an animal. They built it." Midway through the clip, a high-pitched frequency distorts the audio, and a figure appears in the distance. Humanoid, but not human. Its outline shimmered, like heat mirage meeting flesh. Then, without warning, the camera dropped, and the screen went black. At the end, a single frame flickered before the feed cut out. An insignia, a triangle inside a circle, surrounded by the Latin words Specula Silentium. Translated, it means the Watchers of Silence. That was enough to send conspiracy forums into overdrive. Some users claimed that the emblem belonged to a secret intelligence branch operating beneath the U.S. Department of Energy, specializing in anomalous biological containment. Others believed it was tied to a private defense contractor with deep ties to government-funded research in the Appalachians. Whatever it was, the tape was gone within hours, scrubbed from every host site by unknown IPS traced to Virginia. Buck never confirmed or denied the video's authenticity, but those who spoke to him after said he looked terrified. In a leaked email exchange between him and a producer, Buck allegedly wrote, "They made contact first. The truth isn't about monsters, it's about us." Not long after, Buck quietly resigned from Mountain Monsters. The official statement said he was taking time for personal reflection, but insiders say he was forced out after warning the network that airing certain episodes could compromise national stability. Weeks later, the show's archives were abruptly moved off-site, sealed under contractual audit. The drive containing Buck's private research logs was destroyed in what the network called a technical failure. But despite every attempt to erase him, the rumor of that tape, the one showing what Buck found in the fog, refuses to die. Because somewhere in those mountains, the Watchers are still waiting. And Buck Jacob Lowe may have been the only man to ever catch one looking back. By 2023, Buck Jacob Lowe had become a ghost of his former self, a man haunted not by what he didn't find in the woods, but by what he did. When he finally resurfaced for a podcast interview, his voice trembled as he spoke about things not meant for TV. He didn't name names, but his words were heavy. "They told us we were chasing legends, but legends don't make satellites move. Legends don't make black SUVs show up after filming." The host nervously laughed it off, but Buck wasn't joking. Soon after that interview aired, strange things began happening to those involved. The video was removed from YouTube within 48 hours for content violations, and the host's studio email account was locked by an unknown administrator. Buck's name disappeared from the Mountain Monsters website entirely, his biography scrubbed as if he had never been there. Even the promotional posters featuring him were replaced with edited versions showing only the remaining team members. Insiders claim Buck went off the grid completely. No social media, no public appearances, not even contact with his old castmates. But behind closed doors, rumors spread that he had been working on something, a tell-all documentary that would expose what Mountain Monsters really uncovered before the network buried it. Allegedly titled The Hidden Ones, it was said to include fragments of the band's banned footage, interviews with whistleblowers, and proof that government-funded contractors had been monitoring cryptid sites across Appalachia since the early 2000s. Then, in the spring of 2024, the project vanished. Funding pulled, files erased, the team disbanded. A single anonymous post appeared on Reddit the same week. Reading only, Buck was right. They weren't hunting monsters. They were hunting witnesses. No one has heard from him since. But one thing's certain. The truth Buck tried to tell didn't just die with the show. It's out there, buried in encrypted servers, in unmarked archives, and maybe even in the same woods where this story began. And if Buck Jacob Lowe was silenced for good, then the question that still chills those who watched him the most remains unanswered. What if the monsters were never the danger, and the real threat was the people trying to hide them?